Hi, I'm Lars. Welcome back to the C# workshop. Serialization is a really great tool that so many developers just do not utilize. Serialization is the process to take an object and put it into a string in the form of JavaScript object notation, which is pretty popular today. In this video, I will cover how to use serialization, from simple serialization to some of the more advanced options that you may end up using. So if you're ready for this, let's get to it. All right, start out this video. I'm going to go over the setup that I'm running. In common is where I have my person deserialize and serialize classes. Yes, I know they can be one, but there's a reason I'm doing this. For serialization, there's the serialization JSON class file. We're not going to talk about the XML, but this one is primarily for JSON. That's what the video is about. There's a serialization.api. It's the flip of the API serialization, because this is the project that I'm working on, a serialization. Inside of this, I have a worker file, which has my worker class in it. And then there's my launcher. So these two here at the bottom are based on the project. These at the top are they're just APIs that I use at Lars C# Workshop. In programming, we have the host application builder, creating the host application builder, and I'm adding in a hosted service so I don't have to have a console.readline at the bottom of my screen. This is a lot cleaner. It's a lot easier to do, just a lot easier to reproduce. Inside of worker, we have the host application. If you're really wanting to know more about this, go back to the configuration files video, and you will see why and how this got set up. We've got a person serialize and a person deserialize objects, and they're sitting here in common. There's a deserialize and there's a serialize. They are different for a reason. Not every time that you serialize something will another developer that's going to use the stuff that you've serialized, are they going to have the same object you are? So these are things you got to kind of keep in mind. Like if you add something here, that doesn't mean they added it to theirs. And that's the beauty of JSON and the beauty of REST services. This video's main purpose is to talk about serialization. And like I said before, serialization is taking an object, which is a instantiated class, and bringing it into a string format that is easy to read. Deserialization does the opposite. It takes that string and reconstructs an object of any class from it. Very simple concept. Why do we use these? Why do we need to use these? Well, we use these in REST services. We use these to pass data from point A to point B, and there's a variety of other things that I use them for, which I'll get to at the end of this video. Serialization is used to transport items from one system A to system B. Now, system A might have a whole bunch of classes and stuff, but they just want to grab some of the data out of a lot of classes maybe, or maybe they just want to grab part of the data out of one class and send it to system B so system B can import it and use it in their system. System A people don't want to share classes with system B. So system B will create their own classes and do whatever they want. And the JSON, the string, allows this to happen without having to say, hey, can you send me your person class? That's why I have a person serialize for system A and a person deserialize for system B. So this is just some of this is to keep things decoupled. All right. So if there's nothing else you get from this about why we do it, it's to keep things decoupled. Inside of the serialization, we have the ability to serialize, to give some options that will be set to all of the properties. And that's the JSON serializer options. The other way to go about setting these is through putting attributes on the individual properties or fields. And there's a difference between a property and a field. Fields are not, by default, they do not get serialized. So you have to tell the system to, hey, I want to include fields on this. These two guys here, I'm going to comment out to start everything off. I always use them. Sorry, I'll eat the bandwidth if I need to. What this just did is we instantiated the person serialized class into an object, and then we called serialization here. All right, we called serialization serialize and just had to send in the actual object. The serialize method that I have is using system text JSON.JsonSerializer serialize. This will determine what my type is through reflection. It'll walk down the object, and then it will pull everything out that it needs based on these options. So the JSON output looks like this. It's just a big string. So without the right indented, you're going to see this as one big long string. It's not going to indent it properly for you. Without the default ignore condition, so when writing a default to ignore it, you're going to get things in here like street2 is equal to null. Okay, first name is equal to null. Neither one of those were set. One was set to null, the other one was not set. I don't want those being shipped across because when we deserialize, they will be there. And I will show you this by taking these and uncommenting them with Control-KU. And the JSON is now structured right, the way that you can read it easier. There is no first name, there is no street2. If you go over to person deserialize, you'll see street2 is null and you'll see first name is set to null. They are there. The reason is when you deserialize something, you have to create the new object. And since they're a default value in C# at least, they will be produced. Now, if you're talking to another company or another department that's using like Java or Python or whatever other languages are out there that are, creeping up to be popular today, they might not have this ability built in. So they might say, no, you need to send it to me so I know what I'm going to put, because a lot of other development tools and frameworks don't have serialization built into them. They're either using a third party that, a bunch of people got together and they're like, oh, well, this is something we use, and then it kind of gets spread through the open source community. This is owned by Microsoft, so it is properly maintained. Now, the next thing I want to do here is I want to go back into the serialization. We're going to go through some of these options here. So the first thing I want to talk about is max depth. And I'm going to set this to 0 initially. And the reason is because max depth, if you set it to 0, you're indicating the max depth of 64. This is the default value. So if we set this to 1 and we run this, we're going to get an error that says unable to serialize the object, possible object cycle was detected. I'm going to put word wrap back on. This can be either due to cycle of object depth is larger than the maximum allowed of depth 1. Consider a reference handler preserve on serializer options to support cycles, path, age. All right. The reason that this is saying this portion of this, the object cycle, is it's thinking that we have a circular reference, and that's what they mean by object cycle. It's a circular reference. We're not actually doing that. We just have too many layers. All right. I know this looks like, if you look at this, that there's only one layer here, but I'm going to show you two examples real quick. And one is we're going to set this to 2, and we're going to run this. And you're going to see it works just fine. Works just fine. No issues. Now,
hey, if you think there's too much information to remember, then like and subscribe to the channel. Then you'll have a URL that you can go back and look at anytime.
Now, when I first ran into this issue, I thought that we had, well, let me add another member to this. We're going to call this a person serialize. And we're going to call it child, and we're going to put a get and a set here. And this was the first thing that I thought was going on. I thought, well, my max depth, I've got this in here. This must be what's going on. So if we go back to worker and I put a child in here and we say is equal to new person serialize, for sure, this should blow up. I mean, I'm going down another layer here, right? Another level. So we run this. And this works. All right, so there's a child. So what you're looking at here is this is level 1 or depth 1. This is 2. This is what I've come up to realize. I can't really find anything on the internet about it. So let me do one more thing here now. So let's take this and we're just going to say age is equal to 30. And that should, in my mind, that probably would work, but it doesn't. We get possible cycle detected, that error coming back. Now this will kind of make everything make sense. If you put this as a 3 or more, now it works again. So if you look at this, this is level 1, this is level 2, so you got level 1, and this is level 2, and then this is level 3. The best advice I can give you if you're having any problems with MaxDepth, and that's why you came here to figure this out, I would just keep on increasing it one number until you get to proper covered depth. Now, the problem is on the other side of this, I could put this in my deserializer, and if I've got some strict thing going on over here where it says my max depth can only ever be 2, and now we run this again, F5, this guy's going to come out. Looks like it's pretty okay, right? Well, yeah, because there's no child over on this side. So this works just fine. So these are things that you got to keep in mind, right? So this is going to lead me into my next little guy here, and that is, let's talk about the unmapped member handling. And this guy is normally set to skip, and I'm going to set this to disallow now. And then we're going to restart this. So JSON has everything in it. We got our child. We're doing max depth 3. You're doing, everything's great. The developer on the other side is sitting there saying, hey, we're not getting anything back. And you're trying to figure out why. Well, the reason is because they have unmapped member handling to disallow. So anything extra that is being sent in, if there is anything extra, which there is, we've got, no age over here. We've got first name, last name, street, street to, city, state, and postal code, and the person type. And on the serialize, the one that's coming in, we've got, well, these aren't being serialized, but we've got an age and we've got a child. Now, if we were just to pull these two off, and then we come over to worker and we comment these out, and then run this, the JSON is going to come out. It's not going to have those two properties in there, and the personal deserialize will work just fine, because we're getting what they're sending is exactly what we want. Now you're coupling some stuff up again. So now these two need to know about each other. So is this a really good idea? Well, it could be. I mean, if you really need to do that, if you have something that is very secure and you don't want to have extra data coming in that someone else could be picking up on your, in your department or whoever, or maybe you just don't want to pay for it. This is something that's really well, works out really well. So we're going to pull that back off there with the options for right now. And get rid of max depth 3. And the next thing we're going to talk about is just a couple, is including fields. Now, by default, this is false. Okay, so as you've noticed along the way, as I've been saying, the only thing that we are actually bringing across here is properties. So last name, street 1, street 2, street, city. Those are all properties, and they're properties because they have the get and set on the other side of them. So let me undo that. I don't really want to mess with this child anymore, so we're going to just comment it out. But how do we get these in? And the way that we do that is we say include fields and just set this equal to true. It's really that simple. Now, so now we're going to pick up these fields, and so if we go back to worker over here, I'm just going to get rid of this, the age we want, and we're going to run this. And look at that. Now we've got some fields here, A field and B field. That's all great. Go down to personal deserialize. We don't have any here because we don't have any fields that were being brought across. So we're kind of sending data to them that they don't really want, or maybe they do want, who knows. So we pick these up and they say, hey, yeah, set these guys up. Let's kind of go for this. And we're going to throw age back in here and we're going to run this again. So again, there's your A field and B field. And now let's check on the person deserialize. And these are null. Well, they're null because you need to also set this on the other side for the deserialize. So some of these settings are for both serialize and deserialize. After you add in your options here, don't forget you need to add your options over here as a secondary parameter. Now when we run this, you'll see JSON again. You're still getting your A field and B field. And now your person deserialized will have A field and B field. Now, is this a good idea? I don't know. I think a lot of this might have been put in for back for older code, because everything today is properties. If you're going to use this to share it with anybody, anything at all, it needs to be a property. The fields are usually there for private purposes, and you might not want to bring them in. So if you do have a field that you need to send in, and you don't want to send this field in, this A field here, okay, you can put down a JSON ignore on this and say condition is equal to JSON condition and always ignore. So that will always ignore field A. And then over here, these guys might not even need to know it even existed. So now when we send this, we're not adding field A, they get field B, and in the person deserialized, they don't have a field A because they didn't ever needed to know about it, and they are getting field B. Now, is this the right way to go about doing this? No, it absolutely is not. If I was doing this, what I would have done is this. And I'm hoping that everybody out there is saying, well, why don't you just make it a property? And that's what we should have done. And said, B field, like that. And you could have said get, or not even done it. You could have just put an expression in here and just say B field. And in the deserializer, they'll still have B field, and they've got it as lowercase, and there's something that we'll talk about here in a minute. So, now they don't need this. They don't need to be including fields like that. You don't need to be including fields, and this tightens your stuff up a little bit better. And then this here ends up being a get set. And say they've used B field throughout their entire application, and then when you run this, and you look at JSON, there's your B field. But when you look at the constructor, the object, it's still set to null. Now you got a little bit different problem. So something that you can tell the other team to do is they can do a property name case insensitive. Unless you've got this issue with being case insensitive, then you would have to change your side to be the lowercase. But this is just something else you can do. You could put case insensitive with options. I don't recommend this. I'm just letting you know it's another option that you have. This will come in on this side as a capital B field, and this one will come in as B field, B field. It'll pick it up. Now, if it was me, I would not be doing this here. All right. That opens this up to everybody, and we're only talking about this one field over here. Well, I don't want to put a damper on the party, but they don't have anything here to name, for case insensitive. However, you could set the property name to B field, like that. So this matches this, but this is assigned to this B field. Now when you run it, remember we took off the case insensitive. So now when you run it, you're going to get this field out here. It's going to be B field, no harm, no foul. And when the personal deserializes, it's going to work just fine. So the lesson on this is try to get as tight on your system as you can. So if you have something that you can do at the field level, if you're only dealing with that one field, or you only have an issue with one field, do it at the field level. If you have it all over the place, otherwise, like you're bringing stuff in from somebody is sending you a bunch of stuff and it's all in capital letters or all whatever, yeah, by all means use case insensitive and set your stuff up and do, bring it into your side as the best that you can. So there's another thing about casing and naming conventions that I want to cover here, and there are basically 3 different types. There's camelCase, which is what I use, is personal serialized. It's the standard for C#, and I've seen people do like lowercase p, and these are made up of the word. If you're using normal words like person serialize and you're going to snake case just puts an underscore between each word, and kebab or hyphen case has a hyphen in between the words. All right. So if you stick to the standard, going from one of these to the other is not that big of a deal. There's no real need for a big, huge database or anything like that, because you're going to break these apart as soon as you hit the next word. Now, one problem with this is there are people out there that have done stuff like this and said, hey, I've got object and I'm going to put in environment condition. And they think, well, this is a topic or whatever. This is environment condition. It's all one word. These are people that typically are not coders. Okay, they don't know about camel case, snake case, and hyphen or kebab case. This is kind of just an oddity to me, and this here actually causes a lot of issues. So I highly recommend, if you're using this, stop. Don't try to put these together. Use the standards that have been put in place for the last 50 years and go with that. Now, camelCase, you can set this up to do these conversions. So I'm going to look at what I have here, not a big deal, and I'm going to go over here to serialization, and what I'm going to put in here is, oops, hit the wrong key, is we're going to say property naming policy. And you can pick a couple of the different naming policies. You can say policy, you can say snake uppercase, camel case, kebab case upper. They also have snake lower and kebab case lower. Camel case is just camel case. And I believe that is the default case. Or maybe it just takes what you have. I don't know. So I'm going to run this to snake case upper when we do the serialization. I'm not worried about the deserializing it. I'm just trying to say, let's see what this does. Okay, so everything that it perceived as a word, like last underscore name, postal underscore code, everything's uppercase except for this field. All right, so I don't know why, but everything else it picked up as an uppercase. Maybe that's just not in that code. So if we look at person deserialized now, looks like the only thing I picked up was B field because nothing else matches. Okay, these are all lowercase, these are all camelCase. So we're going to hit stop. We're going to go back and we're going to check this out. And if we take this to snake upper and we drop this in here, that, and add the options, this should work. And if you look at it now, we get everything that we thought we were going to get. Notice they're back to first name, last name, because this is what the actual object looks like. So there is no real need to turn around. If you wanted to, you could. You could come in here and say public, or sorry, you could come in here and say property name, and you could make that, like that if you wanted to. But it's already built into .NET, so there's no real reason to do it. All right, so I think we've talked enough about the options that are kind of global across the board. I want to get into now is talking about attributes. And we did talk about JsonPropertyName. One of the other ones that we did talk about here was the ignore. Something that is kind of neat if you need it is this guy. You could come in here, and now this is a double. Doesn't have to be a double, it could be an integer for all that matters. Probably should have been an integer to begin with. JsonNumberHandling. And this is a little bit of a weird one. So what do you want to do with it? So you can allow floating point literals, you can write it as a string, allow reading from a string. So if I put write as a string, when we run this, the JSON will have the age in quotes instead of being numeric like it was before. Didn't have quotes before. And then this is null because we don't have it saying, hey, we can read this as a null. So that's what we would need to do over here is, let's make this an int. Even if we make it an int, it's not going to read it. Let me just show you. Still null. Okay, so if we go to person deserialize, and now we come over to this and we say JSON number handling, you could say allow reading from string. Now if you run it, you get what you want. So now it came as a string, but now it's a numeric. So one thing that you could put in here is if we put a JsonRequired on first name on the deserialized side, the serialized side we might not have it, and if you put a required over here, it's not really going to do anything. Okay, so this is primarily just for being deserialized. Okay, so this is just doesn't work on this side. And we run this, the serialization will work just fine. But when you look at the person deserialize, it'll say it's null because it does not have the proper information. So be careful running required. You might want to filter that on your side so that you can at least throw the proper error out for somebody. This next attribute is a little odd. There's a JsonPropertyOrder, and I'm going to tell it that I want first name to come first and then last name to come second. This doesn't quite work the way that you think it does. At least it didn't when I first started using it. I thought, well, that would be at the top, right? It doesn't work like that. What it's going to do is it's going to take everything that doesn't have a number on it, and it's going to put it first. And then this is just going to be making sure that first name came first and last name came second. Now you got to remember, there's a lot of other languages out there that do not have serialization built into their framework. So they're going to manually parse these things with mappers and whatever else that they do on their side. I don't know because I've built them before, but ever since I moved to .NET 24 years ago, 25 years ago, when I was one of the beta testers, we quit doing all this stuff. I didn't write mapper anymore, like at all. So there's one more of these that I really need to show you. Just like JsonPropertyName, how we can change a field with that, inside of an enumeration, you can do that here too. These two go together. So you're doing a JSON converter on this enumeration with JsonStringEnumConverter. That will allow you to bring up this JsonIgnoreCondition, StringEnumMemberName, and put something in here like hello. So if somebody sets this to friend, it's going to get hello. Now there's a problem with this guy right here, right? You have to set up your enumerations properly, and I'm going to show you why. If I take out not set, that forces friend to end up being a 0. So when we run this, remember, the first thing that's going to come out of this is you're not going to see that anymore. It's gone, right? So now let me put in here person type is equal to person type friend. And you're like, yeah, that should work. And we're going to rerun this. And before I go anywhere, you're going to see person serialize, person type is friend. JSON, there's no person type in here. Now this happens quite a bit, and the main reason that this happens is because if you can see, if I mouse over person type and then go to friend, friend is equal to 0. So on an enumeration is based on numerics, okay? It is a numeric. Friend is sitting here at 0. Every time that I create an enumeration, I always add not set at the beginning of it. This way, friend is equal to 1. Now, you could possibly come in here and say friend is equal to 1, but then that will become the default for your enumeration type. And it's, it did get set to hello, but your default would be that. So now if I get rid of this and I run this again, if you look at your JSON after you run this, we take this out of here, you look at your JSON, you're not going to see friend, all right? You're not going to see person type. Now, if you look at person serialize, you're going to see person type here, and it's going to be defaulted to friend because it's going to be the first thing in the enumeration. So this is why I tell everybody put not set as your very first value. Now if you run this, this would make a lot more sense to the person coming by saying, okay, well, they didn't set person type. And if they look at the object in memory, it's not set. It's not set to friend, okay? So, like I said, just some friendly advice if you're going to be doing that. Okay, so that is pretty much everything that I can talk about with the attributes. Now, one last thing, and it's probably the most important in this video, because most developers think serialization is a slow process, or they just don't know about it. They create mapper classes to perform the conversion from an object to a JSON string manually. And then they create another class to deserialize them from that JSON string to an object. So I know you're thinking, didn't we just talk about this whole thing in this video? And yes, 100%. This is what this video is about. But they also create a mapper class to clone one object to another. Do you see where I'm going with this? If you have a person object and you serialize it, and that's what we've been doing this entire video is serializing it, you can just deserialize it into another person object since deserialization calls a constructor, just like this. So we're going to run this, and we're going to stop on JSON. And this is how fast it went to a JSON string. I mean, blink of an eye. You can't get any quicker. Now, this here would deserialize into person deserialize. So what if I just took this and said, let's make this serialize. Let's make this serialize in person number 2, and let's just make this serialize. Now we're creating a secondary person serialize number 2. That matches exactly what we have up here, except for we don't have A field and B field because we told it not to take properties. But you got age, you got the city sitting there, first name, last name, person type's not set, and the postal code and the state. So if I was to take this right now and say state is equal to, I don't know, PA, I don't know what we're going to make it. And we run this back up here to personalize, right? So this guy's state, this looks like it did, state. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to right click on it and I'm going to add it to my watch right down here. So I'm going to highlight all of this and I'm going to add it to the watch. Like that. Now when I change the state from whatever to PA, notice state 1 didn't change. We actually have a brand new object. And it happened in a fraction of a second. And it happened without me having to write a bunch of mapper classes. I can use the same serialize and deserialize that I've been using for everything else that's out there. So unless you've got something that you really need to dissect it to get it into another class to make the clone of it, if you've got something like that, you're probably doing something wrong. I'm just going to let you know right now. You need to break that class apart so that you can actually do this and then get down to the exact point where you can't do it and then write code to do that as a copy.
Thanks for watching the video. Please like and subscribe to the channel. I really hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you're now open to using serialization and find it as a very useful tool to have in the toolbox. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments below. I'm more than happy to answer anyone's questions. Send me an email if you're having a specific question you don't want anyone to know about. You're always welcome here in the C# workshop, and as always, have a nice day.